Hello, my name's Joy Court, and I'm one of the editorial experts here at Love Reading. And we are honoured and delighted to be joined here today by SF Saeed, an absolutely extraordinary writer with a huge fan base. His first novel, Varjak Paw, not only won the Nestlé Smarties Book Prize for Children's Literature, but has since been translated into 14 languages and made into a stage play and an opera. And in 2021, Varjak Paw was included in the Book Trust lists of the 100 best children's books from the last 100 years. The sequel, The Outlaw Varjak Paw, won the Blue Peter Book of the Year, and both books are very popular features in classrooms around the UK. His third novel, Phoenix, was chosen as an IBI Honour List book for the UK, and his latest wonderful book, Tyger, won the 2023 British Book Award for Children's Fiction Book of the Year, the Week Junior Children Book of the Year, and Foyle's Children's Book of the Year Award. But as well as all this award-winning writing, SF is a passionate advocate for libraries, children's reading and children's books. And I cannot wait to hear more about his writing journey. So over to you.
Oh, thank you so much for that incredibly lovely and kind introduction. Hello, everybody. I am SF. This was the first book that I got published, Varjak Paw. If you're watching this in a classroom or in a library, if you've had a chance to read this book, maybe stick your hand up and say, I've read that book. If you haven't yet read Varjak Paw, I'm sure you can guess from the cover, it is a book about a cat. What you may not be able to guess is it's a book about a cat who does martial arts. Varjak is a cat who dreams of becoming a great warrior, learns a secret martial art in his dreams. The sequel, The Outlaw Varjak Paw, follows his adventures further. Phoenix is a totally different thing, a great big space epic set across a whole galaxy. A human boy and an alien girl have to save the galaxy, of course. And my new book, Tyger, about a boy, a girl, and a tiger. I will be telling you more about all those books and how I came to write them. But first of all, I would really love to tell you about some books I didn't write. I want to take you all the way back to my very, very first memory of anything ever in the world. Do you remember your first memory? My one is actually a memory of a book. I remember I was about 3 years old. My uncle is reading me this book. Perhaps some of you know it. Has anybody come across The Cat in the Hat by Dr. Seuss? I'm sure lots and lots of you know The Cat in the Hat. So I was 3 years old. My uncle is reading me The Cat in the Hat, and I just thought, this is amazing. I love The Cat in the Hat. I want him to come and visit me today. I think that would be the best thing ever. And I think I knew at that moment I was always going to love books. I was always going to love stories, because it seemed like anything that you could imagine was allowed if it was in a book. Absolutely anything at all. What an incredible idea that is. I remember another book that had a really, really big impact on me. I would say this one even changed my life. I was in primary school by this time. I remember my mum came to me one day with this book. She said, I've just read this book. I think it's the best book ever. You've got to read it. And she handed me this enormous 500-page long book. Well, she must have seen the look of panic on my face, because she immediately said, it's okay, it's okay. If you don't like this book, nobody's going to make you read the whole thing. Of course not. No, but give it a go. Try page 1. See what you think. All right, I said. I open up the book. I begin to read. And from that very first page, I could not stop. So the name of that book is Watership Down. It's by a writer called Richard Adams. It's an amazing epic story about rabbits trying to survive in the wild. Now, I grew up in the middle of a big city in London. I don't think I had even seen a rabbit in real life at that time. So when my mum presented me with a 500-page long book with a picture of a rabbit on the cover, I did have my doubts. However, as I began to read, really, from the very first page, could not stop turning the pages, because it turned out the lives of these rabbits were so much more interesting than anything I could have imagined. The truth about them, they were rabbits. They were just ordinary little rabbits. There was nothing special about them at all. But everything else out there in the world appeared to be bigger than they were and stronger than they were. And it was all coming to get them. It seemed like everything in the world just wanted to come and get those rabbits. And just to survive in that incredibly dangerous world, they had to be so brilliant and brave. I remember turning the pages thinking, how are they going to do it? How are they going to live? And as I read this book, I thought to myself, well, all right, first of all, my mum is right. This really is the best book ever. And one day I would really like to try and write something that is even half as good as this. I think that'd be an amazing, incredible thing to do with my life. And I genuinely believe that my life changed forever at that moment. Because ever since then, that is what I've always wanted to do. It's always been my dream, my ambition, if you like, to try and write something that could be even a tiny bit as good as Watership Down. I remember having a very, very similar feeling. Just one more story here that I didn't write, but I had a very similar feeling around the same time in a film. I think films can change your life just as much as books can, and so can TV, comics, manga, anime. All of these are brilliant storytelling forms. And in the end, I think it's the stories more than anything that really move us and change our lives in that way. So this film definitely changed mine. It may well have changed many of your lives too, because it went on to be massively popular and there were many, many sequels and spin-offs. So possibly you might have seen one of them. Has anybody out there ever seen a Star Wars film? I am sure classrooms have just erupted because everybody in the universe has heard about Star Wars now. Even if you haven't seen a Star Wars film, I'm sure you've heard of Star Wars. Well, if you were to get a time machine and go back to the year 1977, when I was 10 years old, you would find nobody had ever heard of Star Wars because that was the year the very first one of all was released. I remember going to see that film with all my friends. We really didn't know what was coming. The lights go down in the cinema, the music begins, and then that first starship appears on the screen. This huge, huge ship, like nothing we have ever seen. So big, our seats are shaking, it is so loud. I just remember looking up at that starship and thinking, yes, yes, one day I want to make stuff like that. I want to make a story that is so big it could fill an entire galaxy. I want to make a story like Watership Down that people won't be able to stop reading, or The Cat in the Hat, a story people will remember as long as they live. Stories, I mean, they are obviously my favorite things in the world, and those are some of my all-time favorite stories. I think it would be great if after you watch this, have a conversation with each other about what your favorite stories are. I think it's always fascinating to hear recommendations, what other people have enjoyed. But for what it's worth, those are three of the stories that have meant the most to me, that have changed my life, and they made me feel, okay, well, this is it. This is what I want to do. I want to dedicate my life to trying to make stuff like that, like Star Wars, like Cat in the Hat. I only had one small problem. Absolutely no idea how to do it. Nobody in my family had ever written a book or made a movie or done anything like that at all. My family is originally from the Middle East and the wider Muslim world. I'm a Muslim myself. I came to live in Britain when I was 2 years old. So there are many people in my family for whom just having a conversation in English is quite challenging. And to them, the idea that I could get a real book published seemed very, very unlikely. Also, back then in schools, we never had stuff like this. You never had authors coming and talking to you about how they do their work, how books are actually written. So I really didn't know, but I thought, well, how hard can it be? The author probably thinks up the best idea that they can. They write their story from the beginning to the end. They reach the end one day. They write the words "the end" very excitingly. And that is it. That is the book. So the first time I tried to write a book, that is what I did. I thought up the best idea I could. I worked on it every day from the beginning to the end, chapter by chapter. I reached the end of that story after about 2 months. I remember thinking, okay, not bad. I've written a book in 2 months. I'm going to send this out to some publishers now. They are probably going to clamor for my signature. I'm going to be rich and famous. Here we go. Send out the book. Every publisher I send it to gives me the same answer. They all say, no, no, we do not want to publish your book. This wasn't just one or two rejections. I'm really sorry to tell you. It wasn't 3 or 4. It was 40. 40 times I sent out my book, and 40 times it came back, no. Well, I thought to myself, what can I learn from this experience? I think I can learn that publishers are stupid. Obviously, those people have no idea what they're doing. Never mind. I will just write another book. It'll be even better. Here we go. So the second time that I tried to write a book, I gave it everything. I worked all day, all night. At the end of only 1 month, I got to the end of that story, wrote the words "the end" again, and thought, oh, amazing, I've done it again. I will send it out and they will surely say yes this time. Maybe they'll apologize about the first time and publish that one too. I sent out the book, exactly the same. Another 40 rejections. And as I was now up to 80 in total, 80 times I had sent out a book and 80 times it had come back no, I was beginning to despair. I was beginning to feel quite depressed and demoralized. And people who cared about me, like my family and my friends, they were getting a little worried about me because they could see the effect it was having. Can you imagine being told no 80 times in a row? It was terrible. And sometimes they would just quietly come up to me and say things like, oh, it's okay. We like your stories. We think they're good. But maybe this idea you have that you can get a real book published, maybe that isn't realistic. Maybe you should forget that and do something else. You'll be much happier. Maybe, I thought, but there isn't really anything else I want to do. This is it. This is my dream. It always has been. I can't give up. I must keep going. I must persevere. But maybe it isn't the publishers who are being stupid. Maybe it's actually me. Maybe I need to do some research, find out how do real writers actually do this. And so I finally did what I think I should have obviously done in the first place. I did research. I tracked down interviews with writers that I loved, filmmakers I admired, people like George Lucas, who made Star Wars. Fascinating. All of these people, when they talked about writing, one word came up every single time. Not a word I expected, not a word I'd even really come across before, but a life-changing word nonetheless. The word was drafts. Sometimes, they said, it might take a number of drafts until you make your story absolutely brilliant. Now, as I say, I've not really come across that idea before. I just wish somebody had talked to me about it a little bit, perhaps even when I was at school, because that would have saved me a lot of pain in the end. But for anybody out there who has not yet come across this idea, here it is. Really, really simple idea, and yet really, really powerful. So the first time that you write something, whatever it is, it will probably have really, really good things in it. But if you don't treat that as a finished book, you just treat it as a first draft, then you should put your first draft away. Forget all about it. Go and read loads of other books, the best ones you can find, lots of them. Then come back and read yours, but pretend it's not yours. Pretend you didn't write it. Just another book like all the others you've been reading. And actually, why not go all the way? Pretend it is a book you have just paid money to read. You have saved up £8.99. You have gone to a bookshop and handed over the money. Now, what do you think? That should make things really, really clear. Because I think if you ever do that, if you ever buy a book with your money, well, that's not a small thing, is it? That's a huge thing, a really important thing. And I think what you would be secretly hoping every time if you ever bought a book is this could be the best one ever. This could be my new favorite book. This could be as good as Star Wars. It could be as good as Watership Down. Whatever your favorite book might be, this could be that. And if it isn't, you've got to go through it again. Do a second draft. And again, as many times as it takes, until the thing you're reading is so brilliant, you really cannot see any way it could possibly be better. Oh, I thought to myself, as I read all these interviews saying the same thing. Okay, now this is not what I have been doing so far, is it? Absolutely not. But if this is the truth, if this is how George Lucas actually made Star Wars, fine, okay, I am going to try it. It sounds like a lot of work, but what do I have to lose? Okay, it was about this time something completely different happened in my life. A very ordinary, everyday event. I'm sure this has happened to many of you. We got a new pet. We got a little kitten, in fact. Now, this kitten, he was really, really young. when we first met him. He was only a few weeks old. He was tiny, so small he could actually sit in the palm of your hand. He had never, ever been outside in his entire life. He'd always been indoors. I will never forget the first time he went outside because it was really dramatic. He goes out into our garden, and at the bottom of the garden there was a high wall, 100 times bigger than he was. But before we could stop him, this tiny kitten goes right up to the wall, coils himself up like a spring, and then explodes and runs all the way up the wall till he's sitting on the top. You could see him there with his eyes enormous, his ears sticking out, his whiskers trembling, because he could see the whole world for the first time in his life. Oh, I just thought, that is amazing. A cat goes out into the world for the first time ever. What is going to happen? I'm sure many of you have guessed. Of course, this is where Varjak Paw began. Began with me looking at my own cat, something absolutely anybody could do. I remember sitting down to write that story. I worked on it every day from the beginning to the end. And I reached the end after about 2 months again. But this time, crucially, instead of thinking, oh, that's amazing, I wrote a whole book and it only took 2 months, I thought that's not a whole book, is it? That's just a first draft. Put the first draft away. I went off and read loads of other books. Then I came back to read mine. And when I did, I thought, now remember, I didn't write this. Somebody else wrote this. And actually, I have just paid £8.99 to read it. I open it up, very confident, start to read. It was shocking. It was so bad. Oh, no, I thought, what is this? This is not a real book. If I had paid money for this book, I would demand my money back. I'd go back to the shop very angrily. I'd say, look, I'm sorry. I think this writer had a good idea. The cat climbing the wall, that's exciting. But I would like something exciting to happen on every page of a book. Where is all of that? Sometimes I would like spooky, strange, mysterious things in a book, things that might make me think a little bit. Where is all of that? Sometimes I just want silly, funny things in a book so I can have a bit of a laugh. Where's all of that? This writer, they should have done more. Well, the minute I thought that, I didn't have a choice, did I? I was the writer. I had to get to work. I went all the way through my story, just trying to find any way I could to make it better. It did get better, but when I read the second draft of Varjak Paw, I still thought, no, there is no way I would pay money to read this thing. I have to keep going. So I did. I kept going, kept going. When I read the 11th draft of Varjak Paw, I thought to myself, okay, I think I see how this works. Is this as good as my favorite stories of all time? Is it as good as Star Wars? Yeah, obviously not. But so much better than anything I've ever done before. I'm going to take a big risk now. I'm going to send it out to those publishers. Let's see. Maybe everybody in the world is about to reject me again, but if they do, I'm not giving up. Took a deep breath, sent out my book. Another 10 publishers said no, bringing my lifetime total of rejections to a seriously shocking 90. But then, unbelievably, the 91st publisher said, yes, yes, he said, I really like this story you have written. A cat going out into the world for the first time ever. What a good idea for a book. I like this so much, he told me. I am going to publish it, and you are going to do some more drafts. More drafts, I thought to myself. Thank you, I said out loud. That is incredible, but you know, I've actually done 11 drafts already. I've never worked so hard in all my life. I don't think I can do more. He said, yes, no, I can see all the hard work you've been doing here. All I can tell you is, I think there's more. I think your story can be even better if you just do some more drafts. I think I hate this publisher, I thought to myself, but he was the only one who had ever said yes. So out loud, I just said, okay, I'll do some more drafts then. I took it away. I looked at it again. No, of course, he was right. There was more. I kept going. In the end, it's very embarrassing to admit this, but I have to tell you all the truth. This book, Varjak Paw, this is actually the 17th draft of the story that I wrote. And in the end, all those drafts, they took about 5 years of my life. Yes. Now, if you had told me at the beginning, okay, it's going to happen. You are going to get your book published. It will happen, but you may have to spend 5 years working on 17 drafts of one story. Do you still want to do it? Honestly, I don't know what I would have said. Who wants to work so hard? All I can tell you is I am so glad that I did it. I am so glad that I persevered and didn't give up, kept going all the way. Because when Varjak Paw was finally published, after all those rejections, all those drafts, something incredible began to happen. People started to read it. It won this thing called the Smarties Prize. I always thought the Smarties Prize got to be the best prize you could win, right? First of all, it's the Smarties Prize. And as somebody who does like chocolate quite a lot, I thought free lifetime supply, obviously. But more importantly, the Smarties Prize was quite unusual because it was voted for by readers every year. Thousands of people up and down the country would vote as to what their favourite book was that year. And the year that Varjak Paw was published, it actually won the gold medal. Thousands of people had voted for that book. It was unbelievable. I did cry that day, mainly because they don't give you any free chocolate. It's not true. But there were people coming up to me saying, look, we really enjoyed that book, but we would like to know what happens to him next. I was already working on The Outlaw of Varjak Paw. This one ended up winning the Blue Peter Book of the Year award. And they do give you a Blue Peter badge if you win that. So yeah, that was pretty amazing. If you have read Varjak Paw, you'd like to know what happens to him next, this could be a good book to read next. If you haven't, you can just start here and it will all make sense. I put a lot of work into just trying to make that a great story that could stand on its own. When I finished that, I wanted to get as far away from it as I possibly could. I wanted to do a great big space epic, something that might be as exciting as a book as I had found Star Wars to be as a movie. And Phoenix was the result of that. So if you, like me, have enjoyed a Star Wars movie in your time, maybe give Phoenix a go one day. But all the time that I was working on that, there was this idea in my mind for a book that I felt sure would be my best one yet, if I could just get it right. And Tyger is the result of that. Now, I just want to read you a little bit from Tyger to give you a sort of flavor of the book. While I'm doing that, I'm going to show you some of the incredible illustrations in the book, which were created by the amazing artist, Dave McKean. You can see his name right there on the cover, illustrated by Dave McKean. He's illustrated all my books from Varjak Paw all the way through to Tyger. And they're incredible, incredible artwork. So I really encourage you to have a look at those. Just to give you a sense of what's going on in the bit of the story that I'm going to read. Tyger is a story that is set in Britain, in the present day, in the 21st century. It's right now, right here, but not in this world. It is set in a strange, alternate world where history has gone really, really differently. And in the world of Tyger, you can see an image of it right there in that picture. Almost all animals are extinct. There are almost no animals left at all in that world. They've all been hunted to extinction. And yet, it is in this world that a boy called Adam and a girl called Zadie encounter this mysterious, mythical, magical animal. And I would just like to read you the scene where Adam first sees the tiger. Chapter 2. It was very dark in the ruined building, but as Adam looked up, his whole body shaking, he saw 2 points of light above him. The lights blinked like eyes. And then something erupted out of the darkness, moving so fast he saw only a blur at first. A streak of black and gold, leaping down from the roof beams to land on all 4 paws beside him. An animal! A gigantic animal stood by his side, growling at the man with the knife. With one huge stride, she put herself between him and Adam. Then she threw back her head and roared, as if protecting Adam from the knife. The man screamed. He ran. He fled through the door he'd come in by and was gone. Adam couldn't run. The animal still stood between him and the door. He could only stand there, staring at her, senses filling with a sweet, high, musky scent, like honeysuckle growing wild. In her presence, everything else just melted away, even his fear. His skin was prickling and his eyes were wide, but inside him was a feeling stranger than fear, This animal had come down from the darkness to defend him. Why? And what was she? A flash of lightning revealed more of her form. She was 10 feet long from her whiskers to her tail. So broad, she filled the doorway. Her fur was fiery gold with coal black stripes. Time seemed to stop as she turned to look at Adam, and Adam looked back at her. He couldn't look away. He'd never been so close to any animal before, let alone one so huge and wild. Her eyes burned like liquid golden fire. They were shining with a light that was different to any light he had ever seen. Yet he thought he saw pain inside them too. And now that she was facing him, he could see that she was wounded. There was blood on her fur, between her stripes, dripping wet and red. Whatever she was, this animal was wounded. So that is the scene where Adam first sees the tiger. She is wounded. She is in trouble. She might even be dying. But as Adam comes to see the tiger again, and he brings his friend Zadie to see the tiger too, well, they begin to realize this tiger is no ordinary animal. A tiger has powers, powers they can't begin to imagine. And as the tiger begins to show them, they also have powers. Well, if they can just learn to use their powers in time, maybe this boy, this girl, and this tiger save the world. I hope you will give it a go. As I say, I feel sure Tiger is my best book so far. I did tell you, Varjak Paw is a book that it took me 5 years to write. And that is obviously a very, very long time to spend on a book. I never thought anything could take half as long as that. When I began Tiger, I thought maybe a year or two. 9 years. But totally worth it, because as I say, I do feel that is my best book so far. If I could have any book to read, any book at all, it would be this. It's got everything I know, everything I love in that book. So I hope you will give it a go. Okay, I think we do have some time for questions and a bit of a Q&A. So shall we get cracking with that? What would you like to talk about?
Well, hundreds of things. I think I would agree with you. I mean, I've loved all of your books, but there's something extraordinarily special about Tiger. And I think Tiger gives everyone, it's an incredibly pacey read. You just whiz through it, but it gives you so much to think about at the same time. And I think I've read somewhere that for you, this is your most personal book. Would that be true?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, very, very much so. Yeah, I mean, as I mentioned, my family's origins are all over the Middle East and the wider Muslim world. I had ancestors who were Iraqi, Egyptian, Kurdish, Circassian, possibly Turkish, all over the Muslim world. But I think of myself as a Londoner. I came to live in London with my mum when I was 2 years old. So London is where I've always lived. And people will sometimes say, when they see my name, which is, of course, an Arabic Muslim name, Sabah Falah Saeed is my full name. Well, what kind of a name is that? Where are you from? I say London. And that's, no, where are you really from? And so questions around identity and difference and belonging have always been kind of part of my life. And I guess when I was a child, I never found books that dealt with my kind of identity in any way. And even when I was starting out as a writer in the late 1990s, there still really weren't a lot of books that did that. So when I started with Varjak Paw, I didn't really think a book about a British Muslim Londoner would be anything a publisher wanted. So I wrote a book about a Mesopotamian blue cat instead. Mesopotamia is the ancient name of the country we now call Iraq, where some of my family was from. Somehow, if it was a cat, that was okay. I got that book published. And that was the beginning of my career as a writer. But by the time I was working on Tiger, things really had begun to change in the world of books and publishing. There was so much more openness to a story like like mine being told in a more direct way. So yeah, Adam is really a lot like me in a lot of ways, you know. So it is by far the closest to me as a protagonist that I have ever written. And many of the things that people say to Adam and Zadie as they go about the world are things people have said to me and members of my family and friends. So yes, I've put a lot of that into it. At the same time, you know, Adam is somebody who dreams of being an artist. Zadie is somebody who dreams of being a writer. In their world, people like them who are considered foreigners are not allowed to do things like that. They're not even allowed to go to school. They can't have dreams of any sort, you know. It's a very, very dark world, the world they live in, although maybe, no spoilers, it might change a bit in the course of the story. But yeah, I feel if I could get books published, anybody can do anything they put their minds to. You know, remember 90 rejections. I did have to but I do believe that is possible, and I think that's for me maybe the most important thing in Tiger that's come out of my own personal journey in my life, that I was able to do that, and I think
Mm.
if I was, you totally can too.
I think that's such a wonderful, positive message, an inspiration to all young people as they're reading it. Because the metaphor of the spark, the light you talked in that reading, there was the light coming from the tiger, and the image of light is so important. But humans having the spark, and the spark being creativity and writing and drawing and art is just fabulous. I mean, the way the words and the beautiful images go together in the book is something very, very special. And I'm sure everybody's as curious as me about how the relationship with David McKean came about in the first place.
Gosh, so Dave McKean was one of my heroes. You know,
Mm.
I used to just love his comics, you know, back in
Yeah.
the 1990s when I was starting out as a writer. He was really best known for comics, graphic novels. But when my publisher finally said, after the 17th draft of Varjak Paw, okay, the words are all right now. What about pictures? Who draws good cats? And, you know, Dave had just done an amazing comic with a cat. So I suggested he would be a good person. And much to my amazement, he said, yeah, I'll draw some cats for you. So I ended up working with one of my heroes, which is one of the nicest things that has ever happened to me. I love all the work he's done in all the books we've done together, and all his other books, of which I don't know, he's done more than 100. He's incredibly prolific and brilliant. But just as a massive Dave McKean fan myself, I was just blown away when I saw like some of the work that came in on Tiger. You know, there's Adam and Zadie, and the way the space between them works across the pages is more like something you would see in a comic or a graphic novel or even a movie, you know, than a
Very
book.
special.
I love what he does. It's such an honor to work with somebody as brilliant as that. So thank you for noticing. It's just a wonderful, wonderful thing to just look at a text as beautiful as that.
It is, it is. And I know that nobody will forgive me if I don't ask the question, what next? Which is
Oh wow,
for
yeah.
somebody who has to work so hard to produce all of these books, it must be a question you dread. But you know, for us fans, us very patient fans,
Yeah, no, I appreciate the patience. I'm sorry. I wish it could be quicker. I would like it to be quicker. That would be really good for me. But, you know, it takes as long as it takes to make a story as good as you can make it. That is always my ambition with each book. And my publisher, who's still the same publisher, who published Varjak Paw, he's done all my books, David Fickling books. He very much believes the same, you know. So with Tiger, you know, we knew it was a very, very long time, but we felt we had to get it right, you know, and it went through many versions. You know, it was always a boy and a girl and a tiger in a strange alternate world, but the boy changed again and again and again. The girl changed again and again and again. The world changed again and again. The world that it is in Tiger, I would say, is broadly speaking the third world that I was kind of imagining in the course of that. The one thing that more or less stayed the same was the tiger. Tiger was pretty much there at the beginning. So I just felt like I was following the tiger through all these different alternate worlds. And that was kind of extraordinary. But I think if you're writing stories around this wonderful idea that there could be an infinite number of alternate worlds, science now tells us this is very likely true. And some of my favorite stories, for example, Mallory Blackman's Noughts and Crosses books, Philip Pullman's Dark Materials books, they take that idea and really run with it. Imagine all the different ways history could have gone. How different would we be if the history of our world was different? I feel like I can do a lot more with that.
Mm.
And I feel like the project I'm working on now is very much connected to Tiger. I wouldn't say it's a sequel because it doesn't happen after, nor is it a prequel because it doesn't happen before. I would say it is a parallel. It's
Ah,
kind of a parallel. Yeah. So that's about as much as I can say right now because my stories do change a lot as I work on them. Almost certainly, whatever ends up being published will not be what I described today. But yes, I am working on something that's very much connected to Tiger. I think if you put Tiger and the new thing together, you'll get something bigger than them both. Hopefully, between them, you'll be able to see infinity. So
yeah.
it's just a small ambition there, but I hope that one won't be 9. I'm pretty sure it won't be 9 years. So um, it takes as long as it takes. So I can't tell you when it will be ready, but I'm pretty sure it's going to be quicker. So please do look out for that one day.
Yes, I mean, I think Tiger in its own way also built on the other worlds we experienced in Phoenix. So I think all of your books have we've seen the progression of your thoughts and philosophies and all of that is coming together. So there's always a fascinating progression, I think, between your books. So I'm really, really looking forward to that. And as you say, all of your books are available from the wonderful David Fickling Press, and you can see and find out about all of them on Love Reading UK, of course. And I would highly recommend. I don't know which one I would start with, but I know that all my grandchildren at schools have read Varjak Paw, and it means an awful lot to them. So I'm sure that one will be familiar to lots of our listeners. But she also devoured this, and she's working up to Phoenix. I think the size of Phoenix is a bit daunting to her at the moment, but absolutely and I'll never forget a child I met at the Edinburgh Festival who was talking to me about your books. He was dragging me round the bookshop at the book festival, trying to find more books. He'd come all the way over from Canada and he was
Wow.
trying to find your books. And he was and I said, well, there are only these. These are all he's written. And so he was so disappointed. He will be delighted to hear, I'm sure, about the new one we can look
No,
forward.
honestly, any time I hear that a reader has enjoyed any of my books, you cannot imagine how much that
Mm,
means, how inspiring it is. So if anybody out there has read one of my books and enjoyed it, thank you. It really, that is why we do it, and
mm,
it makes all the hard work worthwhile. If it took 29 years, I would spend 20, but I hope not. But yeah, if you want to know more about how I write, there's also something on my website. You can
mm.
just Google it. I initially made it for the British Library website, which shows you pages from different drafts of Varjak Paw. You can see how that developed over a number of different drafts and many other resources too,
Yeah.
as well as all the brilliant ones on Love Reading.
Yeah. So thank you very much. It's been wonderful to listen to you and carry on the good work.
Thank you so much. I'll
Thank
do
you.
my best.
Thank you. Goodbye.